continuing on with the TMCC Library Open Genealogy Lab Outstanding Guest Speaker Series, today we are pleased to present Lotte, Lieb, Dula, and Briayna, Cuffie. I hope I pronounced that right. Lotte discovered that she was a descendant of slaveholders and is a retired financial strategist and co-founder of reparationsforslavery.com, a portal for white families walking the path of racial healing through engaging in direct repair. Lotte is also a founding donor of Reparations Circle Denver. Briayna is a strategist, advocate, and future author based in Annapolis, Maryland. She leverages her political expertise, teachings from her elders, and history to help others understand the complexity of Blackness in the United States. Briayna is co-founder and the Racial Equity Advisor for reparationsforslavery.com. Lotte and Briayna are featured in the new PBS documentary, The Cost of Inheritance, explores the complex issue of reparations in the United States, and takes a personal approach to understanding our history, systematic injustices, and inequalities. The film follows descendants of enslavers and the enslaved as they reckon with their past and try to find a just way forward. So today they will be speaking about reparative genealogy. So I'd like to offer a warm virtual welcome to both of them.
Thank you for that, Suzanne. I don't know if Lotte, you want to say anything before we get started. We are going to, in a second here, I will turn on the documentary and share my screen so that you all can view it and listen to it. I feel like I can confidently say that we never saw being a part of a documentary as part of our trajectory in doing this work, but it was quite the experience. And of course, being able to connect everyone with the people that we know that are doing great work and connect with other people that we hadn't got to meet. I'm actually getting together with some of the cast in a couple of weeks for another screening that's here in the DC area. But you know, we've gotten a lot of good feedback. The PBS and the station have gotten a lot of good feedback in how the film has opened people's eyes and, you know, made them think a little deeper or just take a different approach to the concept of reparations. And so we're happy to share that with you all. Lotte, you want to say anything?
Thank you, Bri. That was great. I'll just add, you know, Bri and I teach now we are, I wouldn't say we're professional genealogists. We're amateurs, but we're obsessive amateurs. And you'll see when you watch the film why that may be. And I'd like to have you consider while you're watching the film what it means to sort of expand the view as to the purpose of genealogy and how genealogy may be able to bridge and heal the wounds of the past. So consider that as you're watching the film. The film runs 56 minutes. Bri is captaining our ship today. So I'm traveling and my internet is not perfect. So we'll be back and we can answer your questions after the film, and then we'll move on to discuss sort of what it is we're doing and how that all relates to the concept of reparative genealogy, which is our area. That's it.
All right. I know we tested sound before and it works, but in the event, someone please.
My mother had died. I was opening up a whole bunch of boxes. Each box was like a time capsule. I found a little black book and I started paging through and I realized this is a plantation and here's a list of enslaved people. They're listed by name, age, and value. Cornelius, age 8, $500. John, age 20, $1,100. Jack, 15, $9.
I have known that my ancestors were enslavers since as long as I can remember. What really struck me was seeing names.
Tom, 13, $700. July, age 10, $600.
We recognize our lineage as a generational trust,
Jake,
as inheritance.
age 10, $600.
And the real dilemma posed by reparations is just that.
Joe P.
A dilemma
24,
of inheritance.
$1,200. James.
By the 1900s, there was something like 1 million black people who had actually been slaves, who were still around. If the government had given reparations to those small number of people, perhaps the question would not have come back to bite them later on, that nothing had been done.
Now, when we come to Washington, we're coming to get our check.
We speak the names of those who came before us. Barada,
Ashe,
Bars,
Ashe,
Black Luck,
Ashe,
Blair,
The matter of reparations is one of making amends, but it is also a question of citizenship.
Seeing those names, it humanized it for me. Why didn't somebody do something more to stop this within the family?
There are 44 souls listed in this ledger. If our family enslaved others, then I've got some repair work I've got to do.
Good morning, everybody. Underground tours? Well, you know, we Gullah Geechee people, we don't say good morning. What we usually say is, how y'all be? Well, thank you so very much. And I am Gullah Geechee. Roz is Gullah Geechee. Gullah Geechee people are direct descendants from those enslaved West Africans that came here during the transatlantic slave trade. On this tour, we're going to take you on a journey from slavery to freedom. I'm going to do truth-telling, I'm going to do reconciliation, I'm going to do healing, and I'm going to push for repair, which means I'm going to push for reparations. Can I get an amen?
So this is where the story really starts for me. I was born and raised in California, but I would come every summer to Savannah and the Hilton Head area to visit my grandparents. And we would visit the family cemetery. And that's where my knowledge of family history started, just walking in that cemetery and being told the truth about history. My family first came here around 1770. The first people that my family enslaved came to them through marriage. My family had owned thousands of acres, and then between 20 and 40 humans that were enslaved. Seeing the names of those that, particularly George Adam Keller, had enslaved, because he's the father of all these children that then became, you know, me, it humanized it for me. I really wanted to do more research into who were these enslaved people and did they have descendants in the area. When I came here as a little girl, this corner of the cemetery wasn't quite as overgrown as it is today. In the corner was a tiny little headstone. I remember asking, who's Rachel Butler? Rachel Butler was favored and she was treated special and she was so well loved by the family. She was buried here, away from her own family. You can't both love someone and enslave them. That always really struck me. I feel like this is probably the first place in my life that I felt shame. I have always been seeking for her descendants, and in that seeking is sort of how I found Brandy and the Quarterman family.
My family has been in this area since the mid-1800s. But my family history, whether it was slavery or Jim Crow, was not passed down because of the pain that they had to relive. I understand their way of surviving, but it stripped us of some of our identity. I was born in Okinawa, Japan in 1975. My father was drafted into the Air Force for Vietnam. I stayed in Japan, and then I came back here when I was 13. My father would just tell me I'm a man without a country.
It was hard to look at the United States as my country when I wasn't treated equal. And during the Jim Crow law, we lived in a segregated area, a segregated high school. I had been shot at by whites just for being black, okay? I had to run for my life many times, okay? So.
On this road where we at now, Mile Heart Road, the right side, that's where all the black families lived. To the left side of the street, that's where all the whites lived. And my grandmother always told me, hey, when you go play, don't go down the left side of the road. To learn at that point of being inferior to somebody else, that built anger in me.
In 2019, I was speaking with my cousin Bill, who lives in the Savannah area. Bill said the Quarterman family still own this plot of 10 acres of land that George Adam Keller gave Zeke Quarterman in the 1800s.
When we found out the land was given to Zeke, he came alive again to us.
You got anything on your heart right now? This is the time, hallelujah.
In August 2019, I had an email from Sarah acknowledging who her family was and if I was a descendant of Zeke Quarterman, who was enslaved by George Adam Keller. I was just like taken off track a little bit.
I was definitely nervous and scared.
My question was, what are they doing here? What's going on?
I remember thinking, what have I done? What if they yell at me? If they do, they do. They have every right to be angry.
I consulted with Pat Gunn, somebody that was doing this type of work and understanding it.
And so you're standing in a sacred ground. This is a slave holding den, we believe.
She told me, say, hey, you know, your ancestors is on your back. It's a special moment for you. You need to engage. It's right here. See, like 1,
Yeah.
2, 3, 4. And it's staggered into a corners, like where our house would be right here. For me and my family, we know this as heirs property. Land that's passed down through family generations that has no will to say this person owns the land. It should have been Zeke's house. This probably was the house structure that they lived at. But the land is not in our possession. In court appointed, a lawyer became the executor of our property. See, it's like old bricks from back then. And then Sarah was like, hey, I really want to get you some help to try to clear this title.
I thought, this is so obviously a case of reparations because of America's first attempt at reparations right in that area.
The emancipation of slaves on the Georgia coast happened on the 21st of December, 1864. On a cold winter's morning, they trekked from Atlanta all the way down to Savannah, and General William Tecumseh Sherman was the Union general contracted by President Lincoln. He said, I'm going to burn everything down until I get to the sea. And when he got to Savannah, the mayor of the city stood at City Hall with a white surrender flag. So Sherman came in and freed the slaves. 20 preachers met with Sherman and his soldiers. The conversation was, what does freedom mean to you? They had one spokesperson, Reverend Garrison Frazier, and he said, freedom to us means land. They wrote up field article number 15 for the Georgia and South Carolina Sea Islands. 40 acres, a mule, and $200 for seed. They began to plant their land and everything was fine. 1 year later, Abraham Lincoln is assassinated on April 15th, 1865. They rescind the law and they took the land back. They gave the planters $20,000 checks. The enslaved got nothing.
Reparations has been here and have been worked on for generations. From the very beginning, people were knocking on the door saying, we are owed for our labor.
Callie House, she was born a slave. She went out all around in the community telling black people that they ought to ask the government to get some money because they were poor and they were desperate by the 1900s. She had 300,000 dues-paying members. It was the largest organization of black folk that had existed. Pretty soon, her activities came to the attention of the government, and they convicted her of fraud. The federal charge was that at a time when you should have known that the federal government would never give Negroes anything, why were you telling Negroes they should organize to try to get something? They sent her to prison to serve a 1-year term. She got out of prison, she went back to Nashville to this shotgun house. She got uterine cancer and she died. You can draw a direct line from Callie House to the reparations movement today.
Marcus Garvey stepped on the scene in 1914 asking for reparations. He created the United Negro Improvement Association, the largest organization of people of African descent that has ever existed unto today.
And when his movement became more and more popular, the government decided to prosecute him. Then when you get up to 60s and you look at people like Malcolm X.
America, the so-called land of the free. If America gives us some land, only then will she prove she is really for freedom. Now, when we come to Washington, we're coming to get our check.
$200 billion.
Yes, for the injury that we have received.
It was Queen Mother Moore who said, you are due your reparations. And if you see It's Nation Time, the documentary film about the Gary Black Political Convention, you'll see Queen Mother Moore in the lobby.
And this document tells you why the man owes you reparations. This is how you've been destroyed.
This could be an important way to move this country into a healing mode.
John Conyers introduced H.R. 40, the Commission to Study Slavery and Develop Reparation Proposals, after he championed with Japanese Americans the passage of the American Civil Liberties Act signed by a Republican President, Ronald Reagan.
We look for major actions so that there may be a meaningful reconciliation and a healing between us and our government.
Fast forward, this is the 21st century, and African Americans, we never got repair.
While emancipation deadbolted the door against the bandits of America, Jim Crow wedged the windows wide open.
Like leaves on the Mississippi River. Like leaves in the Mississippi fire.
It was 150 years ago. And it was right now. The typical black family in this country has 1/10 the wealth of the typical white family. Black women die in childbirth at 4 times the rate of white women. And there is, of course, the shame of this land of the free, boasting the largest prison population on the planet, of which the descendants of the enslaved make up the largest share.
Because of what I call kind of the piercing of the veil,
You enjoy it and look at you, your body language is plain.
the country and the world saw something unfold in slow motion that they just couldn't imagine was the case.
Mama, I love you. I can't breathe. Mama, I can't breathe.
It provided an opportunity for white Americans and non-black Americans to say, well, what can I do to make a difference?
This is America's tipping point for truth-telling and reconciliation.
We will watch this bill pass and be signed by the President of the United States of America.
People realize it's time to start having some conversations.
We've mapped 463 efforts to attend to historical racial injustices, not just enslavement, but what has spanned the history of the United States. Jim Crow, lynching, segregation.
The city of Evanston, Illinois, decided that they're going to provide reparations for redlining in that city.
Spending $10 million over the next 10 years on reparations.
11 or 12 other cities have said that they are going to try to replicate what is happening in Evanston.
You know, it's Providence, Rhode Island, it's Asheville, North Carolina, it's San Francisco, it's Detroit.
California task force on the state level.
California's state legislature did something no state has ever done. It created a task force on reparations.
It's much more likely that we are going to see reparations happen on a smaller level all across the country before we see it happen from the federal government's perspective.
My research focuses on the archaeology of Jesuit plantation sites. When you drive around anywhere in Virginia or in Maryland, you are driving around places that were plantations. This is the entire history of these states. I can see it in buildings, I can see it in landscapes. What look to be little farms, I see the slave quarters there. It is absolutely impossible to escape the legacy of slavery once you learn to recognize it. I came across St. Inigo's in Newtown, owned by Jesuit priests. These plantations are really instrumental to funding the early Catholic Church. Not just the Society of Jesus, not just Jesuit institutions. They're really the foundation for Catholicism in the United States. I think what has made the most impact on me is realizing there's a whole history here that people didn't even know about.
More than 200 years ago, the original Georgetown College operated plantations in Maryland that worked with slave labor. Then in 1838, facing deep debt, a pair of priests who each served as president of Georgetown sold 272 people to help pay the bills. The slaves were sent to plantations in Louisiana.
Welcome to our GU 272 Ancestral Pilgrimage Tour. Our ancestors were actually out this far. So you see the cane fields, right? This is
We are fifth-generation grandsons of Isaac Hawkins, the first name on the manifest of the sale of 1838. None of us, as has been said, knew anything of that. And since that time, I have been focused on, now what do you do about it?
The Georgetown sale was one of thousands that forcefully migrated more than 1 million men, women, and children from Maryland, Virginia, and Washington, D.C.
There are about 10,000 descendants, and of that number, maybe half are still living.
It's personal to me. Some of the greatest men in this country were educated in Georgetown on our ancestors' backs.
For me, it was an opportunity to face the truth, to understand my own background and my own ancestry.
The first contact was on September 1 of 2016, when Georgetown was making an announcement about a task force report.
Throughout this past year, as the Working Group on Slavery, Memory, and Reconciliation conducted their related efforts, they sponsored...
Georgetown created a commission.
The working group completed its work over the summer.
The descendant community asked for representation on that commission. They were denied.
Okay, gentlemen, right behind you, please introduce yourself.
May I please join you?
Well, sure.
My name is Joe Stewart, and I'm a descendant of the 272. And I've invited other members of the 272 here to join us today. One of the working groups said that what was missing from this scenario was the faces of the slaves. Here are the faces. These are the faces. To date, we have not had the privilege in working with the working group. You don't start reconciling by alienating. And our attitude is nothing about us without us.
Yeah, I do appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Then we came together around confronting the church.
And we challenged the current leadership to make it right.
If the church can't lead, there's nothing left in the United States. So I'm saying, I was raised Catholic. I'm a past altar boy. I want to believe in my church. Well, then prove to me what you've been teaching me.
And they said, you believe in God, right? God wasn't there in 1838 when you saw our ancestors, but God is here now. What are you being called to do?
We have greatly sinned, an historic truth for which we implore mercy and justice, hope and healing. We are profoundly sorry.
That led us to the convenings.
Joe, tell me about the teachers.
Where we had some tough and serious discussions. But we are still just at the beginning.
The Society of Jesus enslaved up to 20,000 people. And the sale in 1838 was the second biggest slave sale in the 19th century.
We can't just say, well, we're sorry, and assume that that covers it. No, we have to act.
There were so many things. I found that my family probably enslaved a few thousand people over 400 years. Another thing I discovered is that my grandmother belonged to a number of clubs, you could call them. I did not expect was to find that she belonged to this club. I want to be accountable for this history. I'm not to blame for my ancestors' acts really of evil, and yet I am my ancestors. Our history has been pretty well whitewashed, both our U.S. history or our family history. What we usually say is, I come from a family of hard workers. We bootstrapped it. We're so sorry that those people over there just can't seem to make it. They should just work harder. That's the way I used to think before I actually did my research. Now, there's no way I could ever make that argument again.
Wow, this is magnificent.
There comes a time when silence is betrayal. Quote by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. I had a deep, intrinsic knowing that the path to liberation comes through the journey of what lies buried and silent in our bones.
Thank you. We so appreciate the opportunity to speak on the topic of reparations.
Lotte and I are both a part of an organization called Coming to the Table, and we met at a national gathering. They bring together descendants of enslaved folks and descendants of enslavers to heal wounds in a way.
There was a reparations meeting, and I said, I want to start this portal, and it's going to make white reparationists get together and do all this blah, blah, blah. And she just said, you have all these high and mighty ideas. Great, scholarships, all this stuff. What do you have for me?
My proposal was paying off student loans is also arguably a way of reparations, and she was one of the people that came up after and was like, I hadn't thought about that way. I would love to, her first note was, I'd love to put $1,000 on your student loans. And it has just literally escalated from there.
I've looked at my own family history, and I've documented 3 different governors that were likely involved in creating the laws of slavery. When I found out that Briayna had studied political science, that whole area, I thought, well, that matches the harm that I need to unwind. For white people, one of the most important things to know is this is not a gift. I am repaying a debt.
I started working with Lotte. I've learned things about my grandmother. I've learned a lot about my great-grandparents, down to the personality traits and even some of the ways I stand when I take pictures. Is very creepy to see someone, who's born in the 1870s have the same pose when she took pictures.
Briayna and I teach a class in reparative genealogy. We really cater to white people who have a family background of enslavement, and we give you an idea of what steps you would take to begin to do repair work. One of the first steps, understand the genesis of the racial wealth gap.
You've got black people today in America that own about 2% of U.S. wealth. After all of this time, about 2%. How did we get here?
The history of my family really shows exactly how it works mechanically. It all started with Elisha Paxton, my 3rd great-grandfather. He established a plantation near Lexington, Virginia, beginning around 1815. And with the proceeds, likely from the plantation operations, he was able to send many sons to law school, including my 2nd great-grandfather. So right there, you have the benefit of his education. In the early 1830s, several of Elisha's sons, including my 2nd great-grandfather, moved to the Mississippi Delta. There they set up a law practice and later multiple cotton plantations.
Cotton became king. Cotton drove the creation of the Wall Street banks and made really the economy of the United States. But where did it put African Americans?
If you go back to 1860, we know there's about 4 million black people held in bondage. Those people are the most liquid asset in the country. 22 trillion in today's value in terms of the value of those folks to the country. It's an enormous impact. So the first is what was extracted from those people during that period of time. The second is what was extracted from those people following that time during the Jim Crow era.
While Lotte is able to trace multiple of her lines back to the 1600s, most black families hit what's called the Burke Wall of 1870, the first time that black people are shown on regular census documents as free people. So John Powell up here is my maternal great-grandfather. He had the equivalent of a first-grade education. According to the 1940 census, just a few years before he died, John Powell Sr. was working 60 hours a week, every week, all year, with an income of $0.
People left bondage with no economic resources.
There was no life insurance, no salary, no workman's comp. There was nothing.
So many blacks stayed on those plantations, and the white plantation owners said, okay, well, I'll sell you the 100 acres on the low ground down by the river, and I take it out of the crops every year. So that's how we were able to purchase land. We're in my farm in Mecklenburg County, Virginia, where many of my forefathers, tilled the same soil. My grandfather bought the land from William and Ethel Board, white plantation owners. So Granddaddy Thomas passed the land down to my dad, and I own some of that very same land. Black land ownership at the turn of the century, we were 12%. 1 in every 12 farmers were black, and now we're down to less than 1%.
When you talk about black land laws to this day, it's because they were always cheated.
They need to get everything they need from the white farmer, right? So the food, clothes, shelter, tools, everything to bring that crop to market. When you take the crops to market, the white farmer is the market. What they would do is make your costs higher than your revenue, so you'd have a negative profit. You would owe them, and they would roll that into the following year, and now you're in perpetual debt servitude. And then on top of that, they have vagrancy laws that say if you can't prove that you're a landowner, and if you can't prove that you are gainfully employed, they can charge you with a criminal offense and put you in a state or county jail. Remember that post-slavery and Jim Crow, these are very, very hostile times where black people are being lynched on an annual basis.
And so we had the great migration from the south to the north, like, I'm getting out of here. That land goes away piece by piece.
But there is a distribution of land that did happen. If we go back to 1862, Congress passes the Homestead Act. You had 246 million acres that was distributed to roughly 1.5 million white families. And what researchers say now is that up to 98 million white families are direct beneficiaries of this kind of massive economic distribution.
Some of my ancestors had become millionaires, receiving many, many land grants in Virginia, Mississippi, Alabama, Colorado.
Black people were prepared to compete, to be farmers, to be professionals, to go to law school, to run for public office. But when black people accumulated, white people rebelled in illegal and brutal ways. Tulsa, Oklahoma, 1921. It was a self-contained, wealthy black community. And the next thing you know, they were burning down Black Tulsa. There is so much pain and hurt and economic disparity.
Name a program of benefit that the federal government issued. My family took advantage of it, and that's how we gained wealth.
To progress toward an America in which every worker will be able to provide his family at all times with an ever-rising standard of American comfort.
The New Deal established Social Security.
Benefits will be paid to everybody who is entitled to job insurance, which does not include agricultural workers, domestic service in private homes.
Well, that's 70% of the black labor force at that time. The creation of the GI Bill to help soldiers get training, fund college, but less than 2% of those resources went to black people. The government subsidizing home ownership through the FHA created the middle class. That's a phenomenal thing, but less than 1% of all mortgages in the country went to black people. The other thing that was insisted on is local administration of the benefits. Well, local administration is the most effective way to discriminate against somebody.
Those who remained on the farm, many of us got tied up with the Farmers Home Administration. I was 18 years of age, it's 1983. And I went up there, the Farmers Home office here in Mecklenburg County, and it was almost like stepping back in time. The county supervisor would only see blacks 1 day a week. And one particular year, this farmer comes in, he's white. His name was Earl. He brought Earl into my session, and he passes Farmer Earl a government check for $157,000. I was there begging for $5,000, people. And I tried 9 years before I actually got a loan from him. And you got people talking about what happened to the black farmers. That's what happened to us. We didn't get access to credit when white farmers got it. Pure and simple.
It's like pulling on a thread of a sweater. There's a long continuum of discrimination that has an economic impact on black people that makes it extraordinarily difficult for the population to accumulate wealth.
We try to get people to reimagine those prosperity stories. If your family had been black, how would your prosperity story be different?
I started to understand how important this land was and land ownership for Black Americans.
Randy and I worked to try and find attorneys to help clear title. It was not easy. We ran into some dead ends. Eventually, a couple of really amazing folks said, we'll take it on.
Hey, good morning.
Good. In order to clear title, what the court asks is that you provide all of the potential parties that may have an interest in the properties. It's a very long list of people.
I'm saying that one family member would delay the process if they say, hey, I need to object to this. This is unreasonable, what you're asking me. I'm just finding out that I'm heir to this property.
One thing we've learned in this process is that the systems are just really set up to prevent anyone like the Quarterman family from trying to go through this process.
All of it is a learning experience. Back then, they didn't have wills. Lots of us don't really know all the heirs.
Yeah, your next family reunion will expand exponentially.
Yeah.
I think another factor is that of outright racial discrimination in terms of efforts by both private individuals as well as governments to actually take African American land.
It's a crossroads, a place where past, present, and future meet, a place where ancestors and descendants recognize their value for each other.
At this time, we speak the names of those who came before us. Each name, we ask you to respond with ashe, giving us power to present not just who they are, but what they mean to us. Hawkins.
Ashe.
Hill.
Ashe.
Hoppins.
Ashe.
Jones.
Ashe.
We come to this place because we want the Jesuits to stand amidst the ancestors and say, we intend to restore your dignity, but we also intend to invest in the future of our descendants.
The Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, have vowed to raise $100 million in an attempt to atone for its role in slavery here in the U.S.
This is a descendant God-led vision. At the beginning, the Jesuit sense of what should happen was, we can do some schools, we should do projects, and we're saying no. Descendants want a foundation. Be our partner in creating a billion-dollar foundation. That is the long-term vision, to go into dismantling the legacy of slavery. My mom and dad both had third-grade educations. That was because they had been deprived of the equal opportunity in a nation that promised them that. And we're still talking about those challenges. It's time we do something.
What are we up against as we undertake this sacred mission?
Yeah, I don't think reparations for something that happened 150 years ago, for whom none of us currently living are responsible, is a good idea.
Fear? What are you going to take from me?
They want to take over what you got. They want to control what you have. Bull. They are not owed that.
Mistrust, all too often an unwillingness to face the truth of history.
It is impossible to come up with a fair metric for recompensing slavery 10 generations after slavery's end.
A lack of faith and a lack of imagination that deep healing of racial divisions and inequalities could ever happen in many places in America.
You want total acrimony and racial strife and tension like we've never seen before. You make white folks who had nothing to do with slavery give money to black folks.
You keep saying slavery, but you can't ignore Jim Crow.
They underestimate the value of the privilege of being white in the United States.
I just don't see how you could hold modern-day Americans responsible for atrocities 150 years ago.
How long, O Lord, how long must we live with these extreme racial disparities in these United States of America?
In the United States, we've never formally reconciled with slaveholding, nor do we choose to remember it. I've been to Germany. The one word they say is remember. Remember this happened. If we really remember it, how can we not want to respond?
Turn that camera around, look at that. Hot damn, welcome to rural America. Man, I tell you, when I talk about my history, it's offensive. Nobody want to hear about slavery, but they want to hang them damn flags up there. There's always going to be a debate. The word reparations scares the hell out of everybody on the Hill. Call it something else. Call it something else. I never called my bills reparations, but that's really what it was.
More than $1 billion in compensation is going out to African-American farmers who face discrimination by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. President Obama signed the settlement in 2010, and the first checks were sent out this week.
How many times is it going to take for the United States Department of Agriculture to know that we mean business and we're not going to stop until they get off the dime and settle these cases?
I learned that what was going on in Virginia was far more egregious in Mississippi and Alabama. Some of these guys weren't even getting applications. So I started the National Black Farmers Association with 5 original members. Today we're up to 116,000 members in 46 states. We settled the first black farmer case in 1999 that paid black farmers $50,000 and $12,500 for taxes. It's everything that fits the definition of reparations. Apology. I got my land and I got some money. This is many years of protesting, organizing farmers. I'm going through a 30-year span of time here.
Not often do you see bipartisan support from both houses working together to bring fairness to black farmers.
When you know you're right, you can't give up.
Randy, you want to get in there? I'm hopeful that reparations will happen on a national level, but it's going to take a long time. We can't wait. What can we do? And that was why Randy and I started the Quarterman Keller Foundation. It's on raising from individuals and only white people who understand and want to redistribute wealth. My husband Noah and I, we've been giving it $100,000 a year. This year we have 10 scholars at this HBCU center with Spelman, Morehouse, and Clark Atlanta.
For us to create this out of just starting off just on our heirs' property is remarkable. To be around these young students that are studying the history, you know, I would have never imagined.
I'm a recipient now, I could say, of personal reparation. Nobody in our family said, "And who was he?" She opened that door for me. And I thank Sarah for that, asking about the property that my family never was asked or talked about. And it surprises me because my grandfather never left. How did we get so lost? Every time I say I'm the 5th generation of Zeke Quarterman, an enslaved man, part of me dies.
I'm not going through that same trauma. I'm feeling healed because I feel like it's healing me.
When I'm even doing this work, it's tiring, okay? I'm just being brutally honest. I could just sit back and be like, well, Sarah, you know, I don't want to do this no more. I'm just going to focus on heirs' property. I could do that.
Every day that I get Randy's participation, I'm grateful for, and any day that I'm ready at any day for him to say, I'm walking away, this is too painful.
But sometimes we just have to think outside ourselves. Yes, we're talking about white people got what they got to do. We already know that. How are we holding our own selves accountable?
Reparations can't happen without relationships. It shouldn't just be transactional. People should have some sort of investment in understanding why it should be done white and black.
As we gather this night, we remember that we are in the month of Juneteenth. June 19th holds another symbolic value for this group, because the sale of the 272 occurred on June 19th, and it took 180 years for us to come together.
We have received the beginning of their commitment to sell the plantation lands and contribute it to the Descendants Truth and Reconciliation Trust. Can you think of the symbolism of plantation owners selling the plantation lands and benefiting the people for generations to come who's suffering from what their ancestors went through?
The trust now, it's at just over 30 million. So of our promise to bring in the first 100 million, that's 30%. And of the overall vision, that's only 3%. But we can move toward an operational phase, which will help show that this partnership is bearing fruit.
We have been doing this together now for 6 years. We're frustrated. We're going too slow. This is a long journey, but it still has not stopped progress.
I recently bought a house, and that very much has a lot to do with Lotte. Still in Annapolis. My ancestors have been here since before emancipation. I am not going anywhere.
I thought, well, I can do housing repair. Why not?
I'm not gonna say it. Have you established the proverbial junk drawer in the kitchen? Batteries go in there, screwdrivers, whatever.
We were able to get her the resources that she needed to purchase the property.
The relationship that you all have and her coming into her own It's an amazing thing to watch.
I think the personal partial reparations helps build the case for the federal government to make reparations happen at the national scale. We're proving time and again and in different ways and in different parts of the country the impact it can have on people's quality of life. What it's been able to free up for me has helped me literally be able to uplift my community in the last 2 years. I've been able to catalog the Black history of my town, spend a lot more time with my elders. My mom cries about it on a regular basis. My grandfather tells any and everyone who will listen about the work I do. And now my community pretty much does the same.
I just want to encourage white families to do the work. Look at your own history. Come to an understanding of what kind of damages have occurred and what was your family's role. Harm happens locally, so repair has to happen locally.
My grandfather in the Klan, he and his group were personally responsible for the death of a young man and a young woman. And I can never bring those lives back.
I felt a shudder that forbade me to turn away. At least not without consequences.
Andrew Quarterman built this legacy. But before him, there was his great-great-grandfather called Zeke Quarterman that was enslaved right around this area. We're at the end stage to clear the title to own that land. The government owes every Black family reparations. But for us, we just want to show that this was the beginning of our family reaching that reparations.
There comes a time when silence is betrayal. In this quote, I wanted a reminder that there are consequences to my silence. And those consequences live in my bones.
Black leaves on the Mississippi River. Black leaves in the Mississippi.
Sue, you want to usher us into Q&A and actually let me open up the chat because I see there's a bunch of notifications, but I wasn't able to open them while it was going.
Yeah, I'd like to open up the class to go ahead and unmute your microphones and ask our guest speaker the questions that you have.
And if folks want to turn their cameras back on, it's always nice to see your faces.
Oh, yeah. actually, we're not because we're recording on YouTube. We can't show the student faces.
Oh, I got it.
Yeah,
okay.
They can go ahead and unmute their microphone.
Never mind.
If they do turn on the cameras, I have to blur them out later, and that takes longer to edit. So, I have a question. How not everyone has taken their ancestry back, because we have a beginning, intermediate, and advanced people here in the class. Obviously the more advanced students have taken their history probably further back than others. How would you recommend finding out if your ancestor was an enslaver?
Well, It's fairly simple. I mean, clearly you need to go certainly back before 1865. So that's the first thing. We do a lot of work looking at wills and other documents that you'd find in probate kind of records, that kind of stuff, because you'll find during the enslavement era that people are listing as part of their property human beings. So when I, of course, I found, you saw that little black book that I found. That was the first inkling that I had. I had no idea that my family, I didn't even, I knew of one line going into the South, but I really didn't know that they were enslavers. And so when I found that little black book, that was the first thing I found. And so we do tell people, look in your attics, ask your grandmother. Many white families have these records and they're just sitting around. And unfortunately, many people are literally just dumping these kind of records, like, oh, we don't need this anymore. Well, those records are what allow our Black colleagues to find their families. So we're one of why we call what we do reparative genealogy is because, for instance, I have found all those records, I have digitized everything, and I've uploaded those records to different groups that help African Americans find their own ancestry. So we call that's part of reparative genealogy, which is our real focus. So, and the goals that we see for genealogy is how do we bring people together rather than separating people off by lineage, as you see in many of the lineage societies. So we're really trying to heal the wounds of the past in that way. So we look through all those kind of records. Also, slave schedules. You can find slave schedules very easily on Ancestry and any of the other platforms that I'm sure that your students are already on. So you can find those for every area. And those are the first ways that you're going to probably find those kind of documents. But also ask your elders, the oldest people in your family, if they have any knowledge of that, and you'll be surprised what you find. Thanks. Bree, what are your thoughts?
I was just gonna say, we start out broad and, like Lotte just mentioned, the slave schedules, a lot of times too, there's more information locally than I think people realize. So, we have our genealogical society has a whole 2-floor library with books, files, litany of file cabinets. And so counties, a lot of times, depending on how far back and what state and what area, counties kept a lot of records versus the state or a federal record. A lot of the federal requirements came later, late 1800s and early 1900s, like, birth certificates and death certificates weren't required until the late 1800s. So a lot of times before that, it's churches, it's at the county level. They're in smaller places. And so I would suggest that and note that. And I think a lot of times too, and it comes up frequently in Q&A with some other groups that we do, and depending on when people's ancestors came, the utilization of context of, well, where were they living? What was society like at that time? Did it require being complicit in white supremacy and, being okay, so to speak, with enslavement and letting people around? You may not have been able to afford to enslave other people, but you clearly knew it was going on around you. Or so sometimes the conversation shifts to, or the research shifts to context, and that helping paint a picture of what to look for and what your next steps are for white and for Black researchers, honestly.
Also, you can find records. Churches are remarkable repositories, especially for African American records. So those are really important. So if you're able to trace your ancestors back to, a locality, and you can see what the faith communities are in that area, and sometimes they may not be digitized, but you can contact the church and find out how far back their records go. I had another, this was remarkable. We have my enslaver line, you may have noticed the name Paxton. So there is the Paxton House in Buena Vista, Virginia, and that's my third great grandfather's home. The historian that volunteers with that, that society keeps the property. they had a remarkable, they said, well, we found after Elisha Paxton had died, they had an estate sale, and there were things advertised in the paper. And when they saw, they had all the records of the sale, and they noticed that there were some people who looks like had been formerly enslaved, who came back to the sale and bought different items, and then they were able to trace them locally. Now that trail eventually dies out, but we did notice, it's like, wow, I think that was the cook's name. So you never know. So using newspapers.com, using all of those, you can find all kinds of records that you would never expect. I had never, a few years ago, I had never even heard of those tools. And now, and just think of what you can do with AI. Although you've got to babysit to make sure you're coming up with good information. We also have a question in the chat. Valerie's asking, just wondering if there is a role for white family genealogy to assist in getting past the 1870 wall for enslaved genealogy. Bree, why don't you field that?
Absolutely. So that's one of the things, and Lotte mentioned it earlier, that's where looking through records, digitizing any physical ones that you have that are helpful, and distributing those online, in person. I'm always recommending people take them to, or send them to, the churches in that area. If there's also an area where, a lot of the people in tracing or doing research have migrated from or migrated to, it could be worth it to send it to those areas too. But to the origin location, finding places, churches, genealogical society libraries, to send that information. But there is also a group called Linked Descendants with Coming to the Table, who very much specifically do that work. They do stuff in like buddies and pairs. They do stuff as groups. They're always having different seminars and stuff together. There's absolutely a role for that. And to me, even with my being able to kind of easily surpass the 1870 wall because of the nuances of enslavement and manumission here in Maryland, there are additional brick walls. It's basically a miracle that I'm back to 1810 on multiple lines. And so that's where I especially need white people to step in and piece those things together. And I've been lucky to have some folks over the years that I've reached out to on Ancestry, mail me entire trees, family trees that have been done, that have helped me pull things forward, or at least centralize and centralize, I'll say, the location. Whereas I was looking at a whole county, now I know I'm looking just at the northeastern section, and looking for these names and these people. And so there's absolutely a role for that, and it takes multiple forms. I know one of the things that's come up when we've done our actual reparative genealogy series with people, one of the things that comes up is, the cost of using platforms like Ancestry, that recurring cost to be able to continue to use DNA matches and access records and things like that. So some of it can be financial, but some of it can also be the actual research. And especially now with DNA testing, understanding centermorgans and triangulating matches and figuring out how to piece trees together and estimate relationships. So there's plenty of ways for that.
I would add, we have a favorite collaborator, and that's Sharon Morgan, who runs Our Black Ancestry. She has a website, but what really is exciting is her Facebook group. She has 35,000 people all on Facebook. That's where the old people are, including me. And people will, so new people will join and say, hey, I can't read this writing on this will. Can somebody help me out? And so there are a lot of white volunteers who have really sharp genealogical skills and who can help Black people decode some of these documents. And so I've made it a point to always, anything new that I find, I upload it to Black Ancestry, because they've got a whole filing system. So there are multiple repositories all over the country. But if you, for instance, are hoping to get involved with this, want to use your skills as a service to help people find their families, joining Our Black Ancestry is a fantastic way. Also, it is so entertaining. People post photographs trying to figure out who could this be, and somebody says, "Oh my goodness, that's my second great grand aunt. Who are you, and how did you get that picture?" And so we have family reunions happening on there. It's just kind of astounding. So something I'd really recommend. So it's called Our Black Ancestry, and it's a Facebook.
And I'm going to note some of these in the chat too and periodically drop them in. The next question I see in the chat here, on a slave schedule, would an M indicate mulatto? Could that person be a Black Indian? So first answer, yes, it would indicate either. Sometimes you see B for Black, sometimes you see N for Negro, sometimes you see M for mulatto. It really depends on the region and the era you're looking at, and really the person, the index person taker. Could that person be a Black Indian? Sure. But I think the disappointing thing for a lot of folks is that it ends up not being. I know a lot of us have that, usually have had somewhere in the family lore is that, someone was part indigenous. A lot of times it's actually white ancestry. So I know people will get hung up on that and search only for indigenous relatives only to not find anything. So I would just say that in looking at mulatto, note that it could and is more likely to be white ancestry. And depending on where, I will say, like a lot of times in Eastern North Carolina and a lot of what are now reservations for different indigenous nations, sometimes and in different parts of the country, mulatto was also used for people that were Indian and white too. So it really depends on the mix of the person and the region.
I was going to also add another remarkable way I've been able to find some of these things is I had ancestors who left memoirs, and the memoirs told the story of the family's history during the Civil War, and they referred to many of the enslaved people that were on their plantations. I got enough information to build family trees just from the memoirs, which are more narrative than technical in terms of giving specifications, but it was able to give the idea, I even found one of my enslaver ancestors wrote an obituary for a man that our family had enslaved for just most of their lives. And so they became, I don't know what the word is. I would not say friends. I would say that they knew each other for their entire lives. And they had grown up in this system, and that my ancestor did not want this man to be forgotten. And so his name was Bolin Lucas. And so he wrote an obituary for him, and it's not, there are many things that could be improved about what he wrote, but it gave a tremendous amount of detail about the man's life. I mean, they'd known each other for a full life, so he could write the life story. Now, you'd want to rewrite it from an African-American perspective today, but it gave enough details that you could see all the places he had lived, everything. So don't throw away those boxes in your garage, in your rafters. Let's see, I'm just looking through the chat. Bree, do you have any answers to anything so far? Anything more?
I was just replying to Susan. She had noted Family Search has a new tool with their keywords and being able to search, surnames and, the ethnic group of people and finding them in different documents. I just came across that myself in what I was telling you the other week, and finding out that my ancestors were illegally re-enslaved after emancipation through what was called an apprenticeship up here in Maryland. And so documents like that are starting to pop up on we talk about Ancestry a lot, but Family Search, another free site and alternative, a lot more personal documents are popping up there. Heidi noted that she was able to determine enslavers on her maternal line in South Carolina. She located deeds transferring ownership at the county courthouse in Chester, South Carolina, and asked if we have any resources where she can reach out to help identify descendants of those who were enslaved.
And I would say yes. Maybe in a few minutes, if people run out of questions, we can, Bri, I'll ask you to bring up our reparative genealogy guide, and that's what it does. So we've provided a tool that really kind of gathers all the materials that we've found on the internet, so that you can actually do a deep dive and sort of solve problems that we've run into and other people have run into that are typical. So in a minute, we'll show you that guide. And I tell you, we're going to have to update it to include, it's time to update it because we need to add all these AI tools and some other modern tools into it. So
I think there's a question also from DLB about WikiTree in the chat.
Looks like it was more of a statement.
Oh, yeah. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, that's... there are so many good resources. So one of the things we try to do in our resources is just link them all together so that people don't have to flail about with so many different tools to use, but you know which ones to use for what activities. All right.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
This is probably one of the most difficult topics to talk about. Because of just everything involved with it. How would you suggest getting, I don't want to say over, because there's probably no way to get over, but dealing with being able to discuss this openly? Not just, in places like our class here, but like at home, like, if you're talking to, relatives or neighbors, how do you get past that? I mean, there's an incredible amount of guilt and shame.
I can address guilt and shame, and part of getting over guilt and shame is taking action. So I felt extreme guilt and shame for the first 24 hours after I made my discovery. But I very quickly decided, well, what's really indicated here is I need to take some sort of action. There's a wound here. My family has caused this wound. I am not, as I say in the film, I'm not my ancestors. I'm not responsible, but I can be accountable if I make that choice. I did make that choice. And even a small gesture can help people. For me, it was the gesture of repatriating these documents online. Initially, it was the first thing I did, so that other people could find their family members. Since I have memoirs, I've got a lot of information that somebody else may say, my goodness, now I have found, my ancestor. So it's huge, and you could almost say it's a final act of emancipation to repatriate these documents if your family has them. So for me, as soon as I can take action, the shame and guilt begins to melt away, and being like Bri and I are very direct with each other, wouldn't you say?
And with other people that I've been sitting here trying to figure out how I want to phrase, how I want to say what I want to say.
Yeah, well, brass tacks, I mean, I'm not going to like Bri and I, we try to make it clear that we have built a strong relationship, and it's based on truth telling. So I'm not hiding anything from her. And she doesn't hide anything from me. And sometimes she, has to correct some way I'm saying something or being or whatever. And we have a relationship of trust that we just know that we're committed to telling the truth, to being genuine, and to creating healing, and also for lighting the path for those who come after us. We really want to, we consider it our mission to kind of show people how you can do it. Because, I mean, how many, I'm 62, she's 30, we come from exact opposite backgrounds. We live in different states. I mean, most people are like, how, you guys are friends? I said, you betcha. I said, there's nobody else I'd rather text at midnight saying,
I was going to say, people are always surprised that we text all the time, or you know, if we're up late and going through an ancestry rabbit hole, hey, look what I found, just sending random stuff out of the blue. And I think that comes with the removal or reduction in guilt and shame. And I think there's a lot of times there's some on the, in the explicitly lived and passed on, you know, the epigenetic trauma way, and as far as us as Black folks. And so the shame of really facing the horrors of what your family members experienced, or really being able to see something in black and white, or have someone message you on Ancestry saying, hey, it looks like my ancestors enslaved yours. Do you want to talk about it? You know, going, and not knowing what to do with it. And so we have our own levels of that on our end of it. One thing I'll say, as far as dealing with other people and family members, what I found works out for my friends. Black folks are quite much more candid and tough love about things than white families tend to be. So I can't exactly say that I can relate. If I'm hurting someone's feelings, my family's feelings have been hurt way worse. If you're a friend and I've hurt your feelings, my family's had it worse. But I'll say one of the things that has worked out for a lot of my friends over the years, white and non-white, but non-Black, is approaching it through the lens of curiosity, through the lens of history. And I would say, and more specifically, the lens of historical context. So one of the ways I think that the film has had such an impact, in contrast to, you know, the general sentiment around how, you know, the conversations around HR 40 and the national conversation goes, is we're asking people to, or, you know, suggesting that people insert themselves into history, and people they know or don't know into history. And so it's like, oh, well, what were my ancestors doing around the Revolutionary era? Let me look that up. And so then it's piecing together what they learned from history, and, you know, it separates the kind of pent up feelings or kind of anxious feelings, or whatever the case may be, around learning history kind of in a vacuum, having them partner it with family members and ancestors, and using those folks to understand history. And you go, oh, so if they were, you know, in Charleston, South Carolina in 1704, yeah, they probably were enslaving some people. Okay. And then I'm finding documents that's piecing that together. I'm seeing the current political landscape of South Carolina now. Okay, I see the through line here. Okay, all right, let me sit with it. It makes it, I won't say easier to swallow, but in a way, you know, biteable, better biteable to digest and kind of sit with. And that's worked out with a lot of the folks I've worked with for before officially doing this work with Lotte here. Like I was doing that in a way from like 2015 and forward in my own area, and with my friends essentially my entire life. And so that seems to be the way. Because in a way, it makes it personal but also does it in a way where it's like, but this isn't about you. This is about them. This is about history. You also come from them, but this is not about you. So it also, I'm not sure how to say in a way, because I'm not white, but in a way you get to kind of remove yourself from it. And because you've got to go through the past, and you kind of go on this journey of bringing the past into the present, and then you can deal with yourself now that you've gotten all the background and context of the people before you. Go, okay, and so that's impacted my life. How? Okay, so then I'm, you know, me never having college debt, you know, parents that were able to do a down payment on my house. Oh, okay. And able to piece stuff together for your own quality of life, and decipher, you know, what you want to do about that, and the through line of privilege through white supremacy and enslavement.
So we have beyond reparative genealogy, we have quite a few resources on our website, which in a minute, when we finish with Q&A, Bree will take
I'll pull that up now. So
little
we got
test drive. Well, first, let's see if we've got any other questions. but yeah, that we're going to show you not only our guide to our reparative genealogy guide, we're going to show you our state to state history guide to not just slavery, but Jim Crow, Black codes, all of those things. And then we also offer internships. So we'll talk a little bit about that for people who want to actually use the materials. And then every once in a while, we'll have a broken link or whatever, or we'll say, you know, hey, if you just found out your family enslaved others or whatever, why don't you study that history in that state, and you can add to the materials. For instance, our genealogical materials on all 50 states always need to be expanded and updated. So we have we love to have, right now we've got, I think, 5 interns working on different parts of the site. So there are projects that are always kind of fun. Let's see, it looks like there's another question. My line of enslavers came from someone who was an indentured servant, prisoner of war. Do you know if it's common for Scottish indentured servants to become slave owners? Well, mine were. Yeah, I think it all depends on what states you lived in and what the headright system was when you arrived, the headright systems or land grants. We spent a lot of time looking from 1862 on through 1915 to see whether or not people got land through the Homestead Acts. So, and as you may know, so those acts, you know, I'm not a historian, but the basic idea is you get up to 140 acres. And then you've got like 5 years to improve the land and build a homestead. So, so many people were able to pay off their indenture and then apply for that free land and get it. So even I even have some Norwegian ancestors who were able to get land within just, I think, 7 or 9 years of arriving, and they were completely destitute. So I'd say it's I think 1.2 million white families were able to get land that way. So I think it's likely.
I don't know how common. I would surmise fairly common. I will say, especially depending on the era, and especially because of the era, becoming a slave owner was very much wrapped up in how you become American. That was very much a part of assimilating into society, replicating what you saw other people doing around you and how society works. So, and especially the kind of, I would assume, you know, a piece of the fear on your own end of no longer wanting to stick out and or anything like that, especially given the waves of how different ethnic groups of Europeans were treated at different times as waves of them immigrated here. That becoming an enslaver is a surefire way to make sure or push for and make sure you were accepted in society. And so it would not surprise me at all if that was common across the country. We don't have don't have a high population of Irish here in Maryland, so it's not something I can really speak to specifically. But Lotte, do you want to, I think I just saw, no, okay. But we want to dive into our reparative genealogy page. I'm trying to keep in mind seeing that it's 410. Well, for y'all, 210?
110.
The 110.
For West Coast.
Being on the East Coast and counting backwards is not my expertise. But want to make sure we talk about these and pull these up. But did you want to go ahead and guide through and I click around, or how do you want to go?
Why don't you do it, and I'll make comments as needed.
Okay. So up here you can see I've got 2 of these open, and I just popped the link to the library in the comments for, I believe it was Valerie who had asked about books. Oh, Valerie, or whoever that comment was. Oh, do I have books for you? There are books for any age group. Trust me, there are books. And so this is our reparative genealogy page. We came up with the concept on a whim, and that's just what we've been calling it, I guess, since 2020. I think 2020. And so coming through here, we have our beloved Norma Johnson, the What's in Your Bones, that audio that you heard throughout the documentary when it wasn't explicit, just background music or people talking, you were hearing parts of What's in Your Bones. And that was from when we did our presentation in Denver, which was also a part of the film. And so we have the full video of that, of Norma on here. And then down here is each section. So when we were doing the reparative genealogy series more in earnest, we did it over 4 or 5 sessions, and we really tackled these one session by one session. And so starting here with planning your research, initial steps. So if you decided you want to do something, but you're overwhelmed with what direction to go in, how to go about it, if you want to do it, what it's all going to entail, and that being a determining factor of how if you're going to do it, we lay that out here for folks. And so giving you some things to read and reflect on, giving you idea of what's out there. So, you know, everyone, of course, has heard of Ancestry. Sometimes people have heard of Family Search. I know she said there's a variety of you all at different levels of genealogical prowess on the call. And so some of these you may have heard of, but sometimes people haven't heard of Lieb's method. I just learned about that last year, maybe like this time last year, but then really how to triangulate DNA matches and things like that. So giving people kind of a lay of the land of what's out here. And then in each section, and again, like Lotte said, our site is very much geared towards white people, but as the equity advisor, I kind of go through and go, you know, how can we also make this applicable to Black folks? What can my segment of the population gain from this as well? And so we have our standard information and pro tips for white folks, but we also throw some in for people like me, of kind of get an idea of, okay, so if they're going to do that, then where do we need to look? What do we need to do? And so you'll notice that in each section. And so we give, you know, from our own experience, but also in our own research of how to collect family vital records, preserving them, where to put them, how to digitize them, giving some articles, websites, books for best practices, because as we so noted, we are a novice genealogist, but we are obsessive. And given the fact that we are both very type A Virgo people, it's a dangerous match. It's arguable that we're professionals. Some people would argue that we are professionals, but that's how seriously we take it. And so we list all of those out in different subsections. We address oral histories. Lotte really went into detail about finding family ephemera, you know, really teasing out, and as she so mentioned, you know, what's up in the attic, what's in the basement, going through all those boxes and what to do with those and what to do when you come across those. And so again, giving best practices through other websites, not really trying to reinvent the wheel, but making sure people know there's information, there are sites that can tease that out for you, and that information is there. The site is really to be a repository. People can easily get overwhelmed, you know, just by hitting Google and seeing what comes up, but that can definitely get overwhelming. So we at least consolidate them here and across the different topics and subpages that we have. And then, of course, as genealogists, you know, there's so many different softwares and websites that you can use. And so more often than not, people have heard of Ancestry or 23andMe, and that to a large extent is kind of the end of the road of what people realize is out there. You know, people don't know that there's Roots Magic and Our Black Ancestry and stuff like that. And so listing out some of that for folks, and then working with a genealogist. We reiterate to people that we are not professionals, but you absolutely, you know, if you hit a point where you should, or, you know, you hit a point where you go, I'm not doing this, I'll hire someone else to do it, and just give them the particulars of what I want them to do. There are sites for that. There are suggestions and help for that. And so listing that out for people as well. We highlight our beloved favorite, Sharon Morgan, who in mentioning Our Black Ancestry, she is the founder and operator of. And so she was so gracious to us a few years ago to do a whole presentation and gave us permission to have her presentation on our site. So this also gives you an idea of the detail of how to really review personal papers, probate records, the plethora of things to look at.
Radio Zero.
Yep. Newspapers, like Lotte had mentioned, you know, where to look, what to look at, what to look for, how to interpret it. She goes through all of that. So we have that on our site because we all only have but so much time in a day. And so Sharon especially, she does, you know, help other folks with research, but she can only research for so many people. And then going into building your tree, expanding your tree. One of the things that we always note, I know that as a Black person, I always work laterally, and that was something that Lotte wasn't doing a couple years ago. So as we were teasing out, oh, well, why does your tree look like that? And then you have all these other siblings on here too, and you have this, and what is this? How'd you find this? And I'm like, oh, I add all their siblings. My direct ancestors, I add their siblings. A lot of times because of kinship structures, separations, socioeconomic issues, enslavement, you've got fragmented families. And so some of the ways to find, you know, the name of my third great grandmother I've only found it because it was on the death certificate of the oldest sibling of my second great grandmother. And so by the time mine was born, that information was a little fuzzy for some people, or they didn't know. And so that helps a lot of times in breaking through some of the ruts that Black folks get into that white folks on the whole don't really have to worry about. But I remember, I guess it maybe was 2 years ago now, you know, that helped Lotte get through a wall too. She's like, you know, I started adding their brothers and siblings, and all these other documents also popped up. They were attached to them, but not my ancestor. So now I have a better, fuller picture of what was going on. And so you never know what else will pop up. But giving tips and tricks like that, someone had asked earlier about what to do with documents and who to reach out to. So noting, you know, how to upload add the documents to your tree, make sure they're accessible on different sites. And then the same thing going into it more down here. And then at the end, which we added because so many people noted to us that we did not really talk about our relationship much. We talk about relationship building and what that has looked like for us. And of course, you know, it's not the end all be all way to go about it, but you know, as far as how it's helped in our healing individually, but also, you know, as our families have gotten involved and understanding our relationship, having met each other, like my mom thinks Lotte is like the best thing since sliced bread. You know, what that has looked like, and what our the reparative aspect of our relationship has looked like and continues to look like. And so we talk about that. We give other examples like, you know, Randy and Sarah in the group. We've got Phoebe and Betty, who we met through coming to the table down here as well. And so this is really the first start where we give to folks for the reparative genealogy aspect of it. How to use context, so from how to research to how to use context to add to that research is really where you'll find everything here. Did I miss anything, Lotte? Anything you want to add there?
No, I think you covered everything. So we are not, you know, the be all end all site for basic genealogy, but if you are looking into your lines of enslavement, working with African Americans across the racial divide, then that's where our value add is to this. We provide enough if you don't have a strong genealogy background, but I think the good thing about these guides is just the more qualitative approach, which to the reparative angle, which is eventually we want to be building relationships across the racial divide to heal these wounds. And this is a remarkable avenue to do it, to work at the level of family and ancestor.
We talk often in this class about volunteering. I think you were mentioning something about the internships that you have available.
Yeah, tell you what, let's get to that. Bree, why don't you take us through this history, the state by state thing? Just show a couple states, and then we'll get to the internships. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this is our history of slavery and institutional racism by region. One of the things I harped on excessively when I met Lotte is that I really love my state. This is where my family was brought into. This is home. This is the closest I get to ancestral land. I have big feelings about the state of Maryland, as flawed as it can and as it can be and was. And so historical context is really important to me. I also grew up with educators, if you can't tell. And so that's something I also impress upon other people, especially if you can't find a particular ancestor, or, you know, you've hit a wall and trying to understand the context of what they had going on and what their life was like. That's where this guide comes into play. And so we have isolated states into different regions. So we've got the South, the Mid-Atlantic, because people have big feelings about lumping us into the North or lumping us into the South. I like to point out the Mason-Dixon line, but I digress. So the Mid-Atlantic, the Northeast, the Midwest, the Southwest, and the West. Oh, and the Pacific Northwest. We did isolate them off. So we list out here, we give kind of link to some of the historical summary. So some are more kind of open source sites.
Show the southern states. They have more information, because there is more information out there.
Yeah. So some are some sites are more open source, like Wikipedia, like you saw there. Some are more thoroughly like resource vetted, just giving you really kind of starting points. So you've got the Encyclopedia of Alabama, the Equal Justice Initiative cited here. And so giving people a variety of sources to start at and look at, and as much as we can, where we can, going through lines. So from enslavement to slave labor and convict leasing, you know, talking about places like Angola, and a lot of the state prisons down in Mississippi and Alabama used to be plantations. They rolled right from being plantations into sites of prisons. And so being able to offer kind of an idea of a through line for folks, adding in personal narratives where we've seen them, where they've come up, especially now that people are getting more into doing oral histories. Noting a lot of the Black codes and Jim Crow laws, giving as much of a timeline, a baseline timeline, reiterate that, as we can, to really give people nuggets to really start off with. And so depending on what your interest is, whether it's in health or the military or education, pinpointing historical dates along that, where you can, you know, jump and take that and go, let me learn some more about that, and start down into a whole other rabbit hole yourself. And like with every other part of our site, books, podcasts, videos, anything we can find or that we are made aware of gets added in here. And so this was for Alabama. You know, we've got Mississippi here, and we do that for each state. So just putting out as much as we can, as much as we can link to give people really a one-stop shop, first stop. Of course, not the end all be all, but a solid first stop to really look for information and tease out information, anything they may have heard or want to learn, or just are green and are starting from scratch. And so that's the essence of our state by state, region by region section of the site.
Yeah, and I would just say, in terms of internships, right now we've got, I think, 2 interns working on the state by state guide. And so what they're doing is they'll do a deep dive into everything we've got on there. Then when they're done, we just say, all right, now why don't you update the genealogical materials? See if you can go county by county and find who's digitized records and get links to all those. So we're really trying to expand our genealogical records for each state. Every once in a while, like the Virginia, the Encyclopedia of Virginia actually wrote to us and said, hey, we love your materials, but you're missing all of our materials. Please add this to your site. So
yeah, every so often a museum, a library, or something, and we're like, now, how did you find us? They're like, but we're not on here. What about us? We have information too. Share it with people. And so it's always amazing to find out how people in places find out about us, and want to be a part however they can, and want to contribute in that way of saying, hey, make sure people also know we're a place they can come to or they can look up to find more information and piece together their history in this way.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're open to any questions that anybody has, or Sue, if you want to ask us anything, or
I think you said on your website that you have a list of books that you would recommend reading.
Yes, so I added the link in the reply to Valerie's comment, but I'll put it in a main here. So one of the first big projects I feel like I did for the site was the library. So we've got, I think it's 12 different categories, including like a youth, like very young youth, and then like a young adult section. So covering the topics, not necessarily always explicitly around enslavement or genealogy, but even in talking about race, and history and family history, you know, colorism, things of that nature, anything that ties into the legacy of enslavement and the impact of enslavement. So from books for kids to specific genealogical books, to if people have published, you know, personal narratives and historical figures have published personal narratives. There's, I think the last time I updated it, it was like 640 books across the 12. So there's a litany of options to get started with, for historical context, for, you know, political context. You name it, it's probably on there, or if it's not on there, it's just because we haven't updated the library in a little bit.
Time to update.
It will be coming.
I just wanted to let the people who live here locally know that our library, in our genealogy research room, in our circulating as well as our non-circulating genealogy collections, we have some wonderful books on African American ancestry, not just on how-to type books, we have those as well, but we also have a lot of books on actual records, you know, just, you know, birth, death, you know, property records. You know, we have, we've been given several grants over the last 7 years to buy books specifically to meet that audience. So if you're interested in, you know, whether you have African American history yourself or whether you're helping other people do their African American ancestry, if you live here locally, I hope you will think about our library, because we really, like I said, have made an effort to meet those needs.
Well, we really appreciate what you're doing, Sue. It's just fantastic. So thank you for making all of this material available and having a free course that anybody can take from around the country. That's hugely helpful, and love your dedication to this obsessive field.
Yes, I think obsessive is quite descriptive of our class. Okay, well, I'll open it up once again to the class to see. There's been so many comments in the chat box. I'm really pleased to see how engaged everyone is today in this presentation. But if anyone does have another question or comment, you can either unmute your microphone and ask directly, or put it into the chat box, whatever you feel most comfortable with. Give it a few seconds. And by the way, I wanted to thank you both for allowing us to record today. It'll take a little while for our marketing department to get it up on our YouTube channel. Oh, listen, Robert just said, he said in the chat box, I have a slave sales receipt from 1858 in Victoria County, Texas. Can you recommend someone to contact for research assistance?
I can't think of anyone specifically, but one place I will note, especially if it's especially if it's a physical receipt, taking it to your local archives or the library that can help you digitize that and learn how to properly preserve it. So with like acid-free paper and stuff like that, I can give you guidance on that. And help with transcription would be my first steps in coming across a document like that. And that's what I've also told to folks that I've worked with that have come across documents like that.
And I would just say that's the correct way to do it. The quick way to do it, if you have just a copier and or you want to make sure you're not going to damage it, but if you can scan it, go on Facebook, get on Our Black Ancestry, upload it to their files, and then also upload it to the feed and ask, I have this information. Does anybody have any knowledge about this? Just ask your question and you'll be astounded. There are 36,000 people on that site. Within minutes, people will start working on it and giving you ideas where to go from there. So you can ask your questions. So that's a very quick way to get some information, and you can always you can return the favor too. Somebody may ask a question and then you've got the answer. So it's actually a beloved site and a heck of a lot of fun. And again, it's a rabbit hole you can spend hours on there. So yeah, I think those two things would be your quickest first steps.
I think we're all aware that doing genealogy is like one of the most time-consuming things that you could do in your entire life.
And you don't necessarily go into it that's anticipating it being time consuming, and then you just look up and go, oh, it's been 5 hours. I should eat something. I should maybe go to bed. Like last night, I was watching Relative Race and doing my own stuff on my tree. And I looked up and I was like, oh, it's 11:04. I go to bed. Call it a night and I go to bed.
Maybe.
Yeah, well, I think we've all done all-nighters, where we're up doing our research all night long.
Especially during the pandemic. That was my
Yeah.
weekend pastime, was being up on Ancestry at 2 a.m. That was
You're right. During the pandemic, that's exactly, I think, what everybody was doing, because you couldn't go anywhere else. But many times I've woken, gotten to the bed around like 4 o'clock in the morning, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm just praying that my husband doesn't wake up, because he gets so angry at me for spending so much time in front of the computer. So yes, I can relate. Okay,
Indeed.
well, it looks like there's no more questions in the chat box. So I will say thank you both for a wonderful presentation. And I will let you know when it's up on the YouTube channel. If you'd like to link on your website to it, feel free to do so. And let's see here. I just want to invite the rest of the class. If you'd like to stay for the second half of class, you're more than welcome to. We usually go on for a couple more hours. And if you're leaving us right now, if there's anything in the chat box that you'd like to capture before you leave, please do so, because if you log back in, your chat box will be empty. So you don't want to lose any of the valuable information there. So thank you both once again. It's been wonderful, and I am so pleased that we did this today.
Thanks for having us.
Very happy to be here. And Sue, thanks for all you do. And for all of you budding or experienced genealogists, keep going. It's really important work. Thank you for all you do.
All right. Thank you. And I'll go ahead and stop the recording.